They told me he walked away. Just left. No goodbye, no suitcase by the door. Not even a fight to remember. He vanished like a ghost in the night. At least that's what I grew up believing. My father, the man who made me, simply disappeared. And I believed them. For as long as I can remember, I carried that silence like a second skin. It was the kind of thing people whispered about when they thought you couldn't hear. I was the girl whose dad vanished. Gone. No postcards, no birthday calls, not even a Facebook friend request when social media became a thing. Just silence, wrapped in the kind of questions that make you afraid to ask. I remember once, in middle school, a substitute teacher called my name for attendance and asked if my dad was the same Michael R., who wrote those beautiful columns for a local paper years ago. I just shrugged and said no. My mom's eyes had warned me too many times not to open that box. Over the years, I learned to zip my questions shut and carry on like it didn't matter. Like it was normal to pretend someone never existed. But something about family secrets, they never stay buried. They wait, patiently, like unopened letters in the attic of your childhood home. It started with a leak. One of those dumb, annoying things life throws at you just to make a mess. A pipe burst in the wall of my mom's old house while I was visiting to help her prep it for sale. We hadn't lived there in over a decade, but she'd kept it. Said she couldn't bear to let go. So, naturally, when the leak soaked the floor of the upstairs closet, we pulled everything out. Boxes, blankets, dusty old toys. And then there was the shoebox. It wasn't labeled. Just plain brown cardboard with a rubber band wrapped twice around it. I picked it up and something inside shifted. Heavy. I knew it wasn't shoes. I called out to Mom, who was busy downstairs trying to shut off the water. "Do you want me to toss this box?" I yelled. She didn't answer. And so I did what you're not supposed to do. I opened it. The first thing I saw was my name. On the top envelope, in handwriting I didn't recognize. A looping cursive, masculine and careful. It said, "To my daughter, Hannah." Date, July 2005. I sat down right there, on the floor of that ruined closet, water still dripping behind the wall. My heart did this weird thing like it paused to hear better. I picked up the letter, unfolded the crisp paper and started to read. He wrote about the stars. Said he remembered how I used to point at them, convinced I could name each one. He told me the sky above our backyard was never quite the same without me running under it. That even though he hadn't been allowed to see me, he looked up every night and hoped I was looking too. Couldn't breathe. I read the next one, then the next. They were all addressed to me. Some dated a year apart, some just months. 20 years of letters. 20 years of thoughts. Birthdays, Christmases, missed milestones. All handwritten, all unread. And then it hit me. My mom knew. She knew he'd written. She had them all. She kept them. But she never gave them to me. Why would she do that? I wanted to scream. But instead, I just sat there in silence, holding the past like it was fragile, like it might crumble into pieces if I squeezed too hard. There was a note at the bottom of the box, not from my dad, but from my mom. Short, just one sentence. "I thought I was protecting you." Protecting me from what? From my own father's love? From the truth? I took the box downstairs. I didn't say anything. I just placed it on the kitchen table and waited. When she saw it, her face changed. Not like in the movies where people gasp and drop to their knees. She just froze. Then she slowly sat down and looked at me like I was the one who disappeared. We didn't talk for a long time. "I want to ask you something. Do you think silence can be more painful than a lie? Have you ever discovered something too big to fit into a single conversation?" Because that's what this was. Bigger than the leak. Bigger than our quiet, fragile peace. This was a wound I never knew I had until I found the letters that tried to heal it. And the more I read, the more I realized this story wasn't just about what my dad had to say. It was about everything my mom never did. Later that evening, I brought the box back into my room. I didn't want to be near her. I couldn't even look her in the eye. I just sat cross-legged on the bed, laying out each envelope like tiny tombstones of forgotten time. The ink on some had smudged slightly, like it had soaked in the emotions before the paper was folded and sealed. There was one from the day I graduated high school. He had no way of knowing the exact date, but he guessed. Said he imagined me walking across a stage. Said he hoped someone cheered too loud when they called my name. He wrote that he was proud of me even though he wasn't there. Said he hoped I never stopped chasing stars. Another was for when I turned 16. He joked about teaching me to drive, about how he imagined himself gripping the car door in fear while I zoomed down back roads. I smiled through the tears, picturing a life that never happened. And still, letter after letter, he never once sounded bitter. He never blamed my mom. He just kept hoping. Hoping one day I'd read them. Hoping one day I'd understand. But how do you understand something that's been hidden your entire life? I didn't sleep that night. I reread the letters, all of them, until the sky outside turned gray. I don't know what I was looking for. Some hidden message? Some proof he was real? It was surreal. I had grown up thinking he abandoned us, that he just chose to forget. But here he was, every year writing like I mattered, like I was still his daughter. The next morning I asked my mom why. Not with words, but with the silence that demanded explanation. She said he left because things got hard, that he couldn't be the father I needed, that it was easier this way. But I could see in her face the cracks, the guilt. Maybe she believed she was right. Maybe part of her thought silence was safer. But truth has a way of finding its voice, and mine had just started speaking. Let me ask you again. What would you have done? Would you confront her? Reach out to him? Let me know in the comments. Stay with me. This story is far from over. The next morning I packed the letters. Not back into the box, but into a new folder, one I bought just for them. I needed to feel like I had some control, like I was finally choosing what to do with the pieces of my life that had been hidden from me. I didn't talk to my mom. She hovered, lingering in doorways, pretending to fold laundry that didn't need folding. I could feel her watching me, but she didn't say a word, not even when I slipped on my coat and grabbed the keys. I didn't know where I was going until I was halfway down the highway. It wasn't a plan, more like a pull, a gravity I couldn't fight anymore. I was driving to the return address printed on the earliest letter, the only one that wasn't a P.O. box. It was 2 hours away. I spent those miles in silence, the kind of silence that hums louder than a crowd. The folder sat in the passenger seat like a passenger itself. I kept glancing at it, as if it might open its mouth and speak. What was I expecting? A man on a porch waiting for someone who never came? A ghost in a rocking chair with my eyes and his regrets? Maybe he wasn't even there anymore. Maybe this would be nothing but another dead end in a family full of them. But then I saw it. The mailbox still had the same name. Martin. The same small white house with blue shutters that he described in one of the letters. There was a garden out front, overgrown but colorful. Someone still lived here. I didn't get out of the car right away. I sat and stared. My palms were sweating. My heart thudded like a drumbeat under my ribs. What if he didn't want to see me? What if my mother was right, and this only opened old wounds? But wounds already bleed, and I was already bleeding. I got out, walked slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. I could hear the sound of a lawn sprinkler in the distance, a dog barking 2 houses down. Everything normal, mundane, and yet my world was spinning. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I was about to leave when I noticed a neighbor across the street tending to her flowers. She looked up and waved.
I crossed over.
I asked her if Martin still lived there. She looked at me carefully. Then she said, "Oh, honey, he passed away 2 years ago." Her voice was kind, but those words landed like stones in my stomach. 2 years. I was too late. I had the letters, but I would never have the man. The neighbor kept talking. Said he was a quiet man, friendly, kept to himself. Said he'd had a daughter once. Her name was Hannah, she thought, but she hadn't seen her around. I thanked her and walked back to my car like a sleepwalker. I sat behind the wheel and stared at the house for what felt like an hour. So that was it. He had waited, written, hoped, and then died, without ever knowing if I would come. I drove back with the folder clutched to my chest like it might vanish if I let go. Back at home, I didn't go inside. I sat on the porch watching the sky fade to orange. My mom opened the door and stood there quietly. I didn't look at her. I just said, "He died." She sat beside me. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then she said something I didn't expect. She said she never stopped loving him. I turned and looked at her, searching for the lie. But it wasn't there. Just sorrow. Deep, aching sorrow. She told me he wanted to fight for custody. That she didn't want to drag me through courtrooms. That they'd already hurt each other enough. I asked her why she kept the letters then. Why not throw them away? She said, "Because I couldn't bear to destroy what he still felt for you. Even if I didn't agree with how he handled it. So many things are complicated. Love, regret, forgiveness." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Later that night, I opened the last letter again. The final one. The one written just months before he passed. It ended with these words. "If you ever find these, know this, loving you was the best thing I ever did." And in that moment, I knew the story was never about finding him. It was about finding me. Tell me, do you believe closure has to come from the person who hurt you? Or can it live in the choices we make after? Let's talk in the comments. I'm still listening. And yes, the rest of the story, it's still unfolding. I spent the following week floating. That's the only word that comes close. Like I was moving through the days without really touching anything. I went through the motions, brushed my teeth, fed the cat, responded to emails, but none of it felt real. Not after those letters. Not after the truth. Grief is strange when it's for someone you didn't know, or thought you didn't. It sneaks up in quiet moments. I'd be folding towels and suddenly hear his words in my head. I'd see an old man crossing the street and feel my chest tighten. It wasn't just sadness. It was the weight of possibility. Everything we could have had. Everything we never would. I tried talking to Mom again. About him. About everything. But it felt like she had retreated behind this wall of guilt and memory. She kept offering to make me tea, asking if I wanted soup, as if comfort could be stirred into a pot and served in a cup. So I turned to the letters. Again. I read them all, this time slower. I highlighted phrases, circled dates. I was trying to find patterns. Maybe even answers. The strangest thing happened. I started to feel like I knew him. Not as a father, not exactly. But as a person. He was witty, kind, a little nerdy. He loved music, wrote poems in the margins, and always signed off with hope. And then I found it. Tucked inside one of the envelopes from the early 2010s, there was a ticket stub. A concert in the city. It had a date, a time, and on the back, in his handwriting, just 4 words. "I was there, Hannah." I held that stub in my hand for so long it got warm from my skin. He had come. Maybe not to my door, but near enough to feel close. He watched from a distance. Was that love? Or cowardice? Maybe both. That's when the idea started growing in me. A need. A compulsion, almost. I had to find out who else knew. Because people don't write letters in a vacuum. He mentioned a friend once. Someone named Peter. Said they'd met through a writing group. Said Peter encouraged him to keep sending letters even when it hurt. I searched the name online along with the writing group. Nothing specific until I dug through local forums and found a mention of a Peter S. organizing a poetry night at a small bookstore downtown. It was still active, still running. I showed up on a Thursday. The bookstore was cozy, all crooked shelves and mismatched chairs. The kind of place where every corner smelled like paper and peppermint tea. People were milling around, reading, sipping drinks from chipped mugs. I walked in like I belonged there, like I wasn't shaking on the inside. When they called Peter to the front, I knew. He looked like someone who had seen things. His hair was silver, his eyes sharp but kind. He read a poem about loss. Not the kind that happens when someone dies, but the kind that happens when someone lives without you. After the reading, I approached him, told him who I was. His eyes widened. He took a deep breath and said, "So you found the letters." And just like that, another thread of the story unraveled. Peter told me my father had never stopped writing, that the letters were everything to him, that he used to bring them to the group, sometimes read them aloud. Not the private ones, but the ones where he talked about hope, about forgiveness, about second chances. Peter handed me something then, a notebook, old, worn, full of scribbled lines and ideas. He said my father had given it to him to hold on to, just in case. Inside was a final note, one not meant for mail. It said, "If Hannah ever comes looking, tell her this. You are the best story I never got to finish." I pressed the notebook to my chest and closed my eyes. Some stories don't need an ending. They just need to be remembered. Have you ever felt like someone was watching over you, even in their absence? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your story too. And don't go far. The next part of this journey is the one I never saw coming. After meeting Peter, something shifted inside me. It wasn't peace exactly, more like a steadiness I hadn't felt in weeks. I carried that notebook everywhere for days, like it was a map even though I didn't yet know where it led. His words were scribbled in ink, sometimes barely legible, but they pulsed with life. He wrote about love, regret, memory, about me. One line kept echoing in my mind. You are the best story I never got to finish. I couldn't stop thinking about that. It didn't make me feel abandoned. It made me feel unfinished too, like I was walking around with pages still waiting to be written. So I started writing. At first, I wrote just for me. I sat in cafes, scribbled in journals, typed until my fingers ached. Not stories exactly. Fragments, memories, feelings, questions I never got to ask. What was your favorite song, Dad? Did you ever stand outside my school, just watching? Did you cry when you wrote my name on those envelopes? Writing didn't fix anything, but it helped me breathe. Then something happened. Peter emailed me a week later, said he'd spoken with some of the old members of the writing group, told them about me. One of them, her name was Celeste, reached out. She had known my father, too. Said she remembered me, sort of, from photos he'd bring in. She asked if I wanted to meet, so I did. Celeste lived in a little bungalow just outside town. The place smelled like lavender and old books. She met me at the door with a long hug, like I was someone she'd missed without realizing it. We sat at her kitchen table, sunlight pouring in through gauzy curtains. She poured tea, pushed over a tin of cookies, and began to talk. She told me things I never expected to hear, that he used to write me poems, that he carried one of my baby pictures in his wallet until it fell apart, that he once read a letter to the group where he described my laugh, how he remembered it even though I was only 5 when he left, how he said it sounded like wind chimes in a summer storm. I felt something collapse and rebuild inside me all at once. Then she gave me something, cassette tape. She said it was a recording from one of the writing nights. Someone used to bring an old recorder just for fun. This one, she said, had my dad reading a short piece about fatherhood. I didn't even wait to get home. I found an old Walkman in her attic, still working, miraculously. Put in the tape, pressed play. There he was. His voice. I didn't know what I thought he'd sound like, but as soon as I heard it, something inside me said, of course, that's him. It was warm, calm, with a slight tremble when he got emotional. He spoke like he was thinking aloud, not performing. And when he said my name, I cried, quietly, like something sacred was happening. He ended the piece by saying this, even if she never knows me, I hope she knows she was loved. I took the tape home, played it again that night, then again. I memorized every pause, every breath. Have you ever heard a voice you didn't know you were missing? It's a strange kind of magic, like time folding in on itself, like grief meeting grace. I don't know what happens next. Not really. But I do know this. He never stopped loving me. And even though our story was unfinished, I get to carry the pen now. What would you do with a truth like that? Share your thoughts. I'll be reading. The next part, it's not what I expected, but it changed everything. I didn't tell Mom about the recording. Not at first. It felt like something sacred, something that belonged just to me. For the first time, I had a piece of him that she couldn't edit or hide. A part of him that reached across time, across her choices, and spoke directly to me. But secrets, even the beautiful ones, get heavy when carried alone. So one night after dinner, I asked her to sit with me.
No preamble. No warnings.
Just the tape, the old Walkman, and a set of headphones between us. She hesitated. I think part of her knew exactly what it was. But she took the headphones, pressed them over her ears, and closed her eyes. I watched her face the whole time. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. But I saw something in her eyes shift. Something soften. When it ended, she handed the headphones back and just sat there, quiet. After a long moment, she whispered, "He really did love you." It wasn't a revelation. Not anymore. But it still mattered coming from her. Then she did something unexpected. She went upstairs and came back with a small, dusty photo album I had never seen before. It was hidden in a box inside her closet, buried beneath old tax papers and winter sweaters. She placed it on the table and pushed it toward me. It was filled with pictures of me and him, baby photos, trips to the zoo, my tiny hand in his, him holding me on his shoulders, smiling, always smiling. I didn't even know these moments existed. I had spent years thinking he disappeared when I was too young to remember. But here was proof that we had time. Real time. Not just imagined memories or secondhand stories. My mom said she kept the album hidden because it was too painful. That looking at it felt like reopening a wound that never healed. She thought shielding me from it would protect us both. But all it did was delay the truth. I spent the rest of the evening flipping through those pages. I asked her about each photo, where we were, what he said, whether I laughed or cried. And she answered, slowly, carefully, like every word was being pulled from a deep place. And for the first time in years, we weren't strangers divided by silence. We were two people, sitting with the same grief, trying to untangle it. Later that night, after she went to bed, I found myself staring at one picture in particular. It was us in a park. He was lying on the grass, and I was sitting on his chest, mid-laugh, my hair wild and messy, his eyes crinkled with joy. I took a photo of it with my phone, made it my background. I wanted that reminder, that proof. It's strange, isn't it? How something as simple as a photograph can rewrite your whole understanding of the past. I wonder how many of us are living incomplete stories. How many truths are hidden in closets, in attics, in unspoken memories. What about you? Is there a part of your family's story that still feels like a missing page? I'm here, and I'd love to hear it. What comes next? Well, it's the moment I realized forgiveness isn't a decision. It's a journey. Forgiveness is strange. We often think of it as a switch, on or off, given or withheld. But in reality, it's more like a path. Some parts are smooth, others cut your feet. And sometimes, you don't realize you've been walking it until you look back and see how far you've come. In the weeks that followed, my mother and I found a new rhythm. Not perfect, not easy, but more open. She started telling me stories she had buried. About their first date. About how he used to write notes and hide them in her coat pockets. About the day I was born, how he cried when he held me. I didn't expect those stories to hurt as much as they healed. Because every sweet detail was another reminder of what could have been. Still, I listened, and she talked. And slowly, something between us began to repair. Not like a broken plate glued back together, but like new growth after a fire. Delicate, real. I started writing again, too. Not just scattered thoughts or questions, but a story. Our story. I didn't know if I'd ever show it to anyone. It wasn't for the world. It was for me. And maybe for him. One day, while digging through the notebook Peter had given me, I found something tucked between two pages. A brochure. Old, creased, but still readable. It was for a writing retreat. A cabin in the mountains. Weekend workshops. Reflection. Silence. A date scribbled in the corner from almost a decade ago. At the bottom, in his handwriting, "I think you'd love this." I looked it up, and it still existed. Without really thinking, I booked a spot. I told my mom I needed to get away, clear my head. She didn't question it, just handed me a thermos and told me to bring extra socks. The retreat was tucked deep in the woods, surrounded by pines and the kind of quiet that rings in your ears. 10 other people showed up, all strangers, But grief has a way of recognizing itself. We wrote, we walked, we sat in silence. I shared a little, listened a lot. It felt like breathing again after holding your breath for too long. One night we sat around a fire.
No phones. No noise.
Just stories. When it was my turn, I hesitated. Then I told them. Not everything. Just enough. About the box. The letters. The voice I never thought I'd hear. And the woman who thought silence could protect me. They listened. Not with pity, but with that kind of stillness that means someone really hears you. And when I finished, one of the women, an older writer with silver hair and a voice like velvet, looked at me and said something I'll never forget. She said, "Sometimes the stories we lose find their way back in other forms." That night I wrote until dawn. Pages and pages. I felt like I wasn't just telling a story. I was stitching a wound. I came back home with a full notebook and a lighter heart. My mom hugged me at the door like she hadn't seen me in years. And then she said something that caught me completely off guard. She said, "There's something else you should see." I wasn't ready, but I nodded. And what she showed me next changed everything I thought I knew. Stay with me, because the truth, the full truth, was still waiting. And it would shake everything I thought was finally settled. She brought out another box. This one was smaller, lighter, covered in a floral cloth that looked worn at the edges. My mother placed it gently on the table like it held something living, something sacred. Her hands trembled just enough to make me nervous. I didn't ask what was inside. I just waited. She opened the box slowly. Inside were letters. But these weren't from him. These were hers. Written, she said, during the first few years after he left. But never sent. She told me she used to write to him when I was asleep. When the silence in the house was too loud and her anger didn't have anywhere to go. These were her confessions. Her grief. Her fury. Her love, too. I reached in and took one. The paper was yellowed, soft at the creases. She had written in long, rushed strokes. Not the careful, filtered tone she used when talking to me. This was raw. Honest. Like blood on a page. The letter I opened was from the second year after he left. She talked about me starting school, how I refused to wear matching socks, how I made a friend who only ate green foods. Then she wrote about crying in the laundry room after finding one of his old shirts. Said she missed the smell of ink and coffee on him. Said she hated him for making her miss him. I read 3, then 4. Each one cracked something open in me. Because for all the walls she'd built around herself, these letters were proof she had once tried to let the truth out. Just in secret. She said she kept them because they were the only way she could survive the version of the story she chose to live with. She asked me if I could forgive her. Not out loud. Not with those words. But it was there. In the way she looked at me. In the way she let me read everything without trying to explain. Forgiveness isn't easy. Especially when you've spent years building your anger like armor. But that night something shifted. Because now I had both sides. His love. Her pain. And somewhere in between, my story. I decided to do something with all of it. I compiled the letters, his and hers, and my own notes. I didn't know if I was writing a book or a journal or just something to keep from drowning in the flood of it all. But it helped. Every word felt like a step forward. Then I got an idea. Started small. A blog.
Mredzi.
Just a place to share pieces of the letters, my reflections, memories as they resurfaced. I called it Unsent. I didn't expect anyone to find it, but they did. The comments started slow. A few people saying they felt seen. Others saying they had their own boxes of secrets. Then came the emails. Stories from strangers. Fathers trying to reconnect. Daughters who never got closure. Mothers apologizing to their grown children. I wasn't alone. None of us were. I told my mom about the blog. She was quiet. Then she asked if I'd post one of her letters. So I did. The response was overwhelming. People thanked her. Said they'd never heard a mother admit that kind of vulnerability before. Said it gave them courage. And just like that, her silence became someone else's voice. Sometimes healing doesn't look like what we expect. Sometimes it's not a hug or a conversation. Sometimes it's a blog post, a box of letters, A stranger's comment at 2 a.m. I had no idea how far this would go. But what happened next? I still can't believe it myself. And I can't wait to tell you. What happened next felt like a ripple becoming a wave. It started with an email. A literary agent who read the blog reached out. Said she was moved. Said there was something powerful in how the story unfolded. Said it could help people. She asked if I'd ever thought of turning it into a book. I stared at the screen for a long time. Me? A book? But then I thought about all those nights writing by lamplight, all those pages I had poured myself into. I thought about the notebook, the cassette, the photos, the letters that changed everything. Maybe the story wasn't just mine to carry anymore. I said yes. The process was long, hard, emotional. I had to revisit moments I thought I'd tucked away for good. I had to interview my mother again, ask her questions I was scared to hear the answers to. But she showed up. Every time. More honest than I'd ever known her to be. We started healing in unexpected ways. Not just through conversation, but through creation. It was like rewriting the past by finally telling the whole truth. I included parts of the letters, some word for word. Others I paraphrased to protect the parts of him that still felt too intimate. I wrote about the silence, the pain, but also the beauty that bloomed through the cracks. And people responded. When the book came out, it didn't go viral. It didn't top any charts. But it reached people. Real people. Letters came in from all over. Readers who found their own stories hidden in mine. Some even sent in copies of their family letters. Others started writing their own for the first time in decades. One woman told me she kept a shoebox under her bed full of letters to the daughter she gave up for adoption. She said my story gave her the courage to try and find her. Another man said he forgave his father for 20 years of silence after reading just one chapter. It was humbling, healing, and surreal. I printed out every message, created a new box, this one not hidden but proudly displayed on a shelf in my living room. A box full of echoes, of lives stitched together by truth and words. One night, I sat with my mom and read some of the letters aloud. She cried. Not the quiet, controlled tears I was used to, but the kind that come from being seen, maybe for the first time in a long time. She looked at me and said, I never imagined this would come from all that pain. I didn't either. But maybe that's the thing about pain. If we're brave enough to look at it, to sit with it, sometimes it grows into something more. Not a happy ending, but an honest one. And then came the call I never expected. A local museum curator had heard about the story. She wanted to feature the letters, his, mine, and even some of the reader submissions as part of an exhibit on modern memory and communication. She called it Unsent, the letters that spoke anyway. When I walked into the gallery on opening night, I almost couldn't breathe. There, under glass, were my father's words, my mother's grief, my journey, all laid bare for the world to see. People moved slowly through the space. Some cried, some smiled, some just stood still, holding the hands of the people beside them. And I realized, standing there under soft museum lights, that silence had finally spoken, and people were listening. Do you believe stories can heal? Because I do. The next part of this story, it brought everything full circle. I stood in the middle of that exhibit, surrounded by letters that had once been hidden, and felt something I never expected, peace. It didn't erase the years. It didn't fix the missing birthdays, the quiet ache that still lived under my ribs. But it gave the pain shape. It gave it a voice. And when pain is named, it loses some of its power. As I walked through the gallery, I watched people read the displays. Some took pictures. Others leaned in closer, like they were looking for their own stories between the lines. A teenage boy stared at one of my dad's letters for a long time, then reached for his phone, typing something quickly. A mother gently explained to her daughter what it meant to miss someone you can't call. It was strange and beautiful and hard. Afterward, there was a small reception. People sipped coffee and tea, murmuring softly, like we were all part of something sacred. The curator came over to thank me. Then she handed me something, a letter. It was from a man named James. He had visited the exhibit the day before and left a handwritten note. He said he recognized my father's name. that they had worked together briefly in the late 90s. Said he remembered my dad speaking about a daughter he missed every single day. At the end of his note, James included a copy of a photograph. A grainy shot of my dad at a small cafe, holding a pen, smiling at the camera. On the back, a single sentence. He never stopped hoping she'd find him. I clutched the photo like it was glass. Later that week, I shared the image on the blog. The response was overwhelming. People who had followed the story from the beginning commented with hearts, prayers, memories of their own. One woman said she felt like she'd watched a garden grow from a single seed. And then one of my old high school teachers reached out. She told me she'd had no idea what I was going through back then, that she wished she had asked more questions, that sometimes she noticed the way I stared out windows and now understood what I was looking for. It reminded me that grief is often invisible. We walk past people every day who are carrying unsent letters in their hearts. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table with my mom, sipping tea in silence. Then I asked her something I'd never dared before. "Do you regret it? Not telling me?" She took a long breath, then said, "I regret not trusting you with the truth. I thought I was saving you, but really I was just scared." We sat there for a long time, not talking. And that silence, for once, didn't hurt, felt honest, felt earned. And in that moment, I realized something important. Truth doesn't always arrive with trumpets. Sometimes it shows up like tea shared quietly across a table, between two people who are still learning how to forgive. I want to ask you something now. Who in your life might be holding a truth they're too scared to share? And are you ready to hear it? Because the final part of this story, it's not really an end at all. It's a beginning. The day I finished writing the last page of our story, it was raining. Not the dramatic, stormy kind. Just a quiet drizzle, steady and soft, like the sky was letting go of something it had carried too long. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, the printed pages stacked neatly beside me. It felt like closing a door gently, not slamming it shut. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant or broken. I felt still. And sometimes stillness is its own kind of victory. People had started to ask me what came next. Would I write another book? Would I start a podcast? Go on tour? I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that telling the truth had changed me. It had softened me where I was once sharp, strengthened me where I used to feel hollow. Mom had changed too, subtly, but in ways that mattered. She no longer tiptoed around the past. Sometimes she'd sit beside me and ask if I remembered something. Park, a song, a smell from the kitchen. And then she'd tell me what she remembered too. We were building a new kind of memory together. One morning, she gave me the last of the things she'd kept hidden. A videotape. She said she found it in an old box marked vacation. She hadn't realized what was on it. Not until recently. We didn't have a working VCR, so I took it to a local shop that digitized old media. Took a few days. When the file finally came, I watched it alone. It was shaky home footage. My dad was behind the camera, narrating our day at the beach. My toddler self toddled toward the water, giggling, calling for him. And then the camera turned, just for a second, and there he was, smiling. I paused it, froze the frame, studied his face, the curve of his mouth, the way he squinted into the sun. It wasn't a goodbye. It wasn't a letter. It was just a moment, but it felt like the full circle I didn't know I needed. Later that night, I played the video for my mom. We didn't speak during it. We just watched. Two women who had once been bound by secrets, now sitting in the light of a small screen, letting the past speak freely. When it ended, I said thank you, not just for the tape, but for finally letting me see it all. Since then, life has been quieter. Not dull, but grounded. I write more. I teach a little. I still run the blog and letters still come in. People keep finding their own stories in the spaces between my words. Sometimes, when I walk past my bookshelf, I run my hand along the spine of the book, not to admire it, but to remember what it cost, what it gave back. And every now and then, when the sky goes quiet and the stars come out, I look up, just like he said he used to, and I whisper, I found you. I found me too. Now I want to ask you one last question. What story have you been afraid to tell? Maybe it's time to write it. This story was voiced by artificial intelligence. While we strive for clarity and emotion, occasional imperfections may occur. Please let us know in the comments if you catch any errors so we can improve. And thank you for listening, for feeling, for remembering. See you in the next story.